is what the AI CPA has communicated to us. Then they've divided the entire syllabus into three major sections. The first section is financial reporting. The next section is when they want you to dig deep into certain select balance sheet accounts. And the last section is when they're going to test you on certain transactions. Now, this actually does not make much sense now. But when I do a drill down of the syllabus, okay, and I'll tell you what is the source of this. It's just the AI CPA blueprint. So let me first run you through this, and then I'll take you to the AI CPA blueprint also to help you understand how I make this. The first section is actually financial reporting. Now, ideally, people start with this section, but actually, this is the culmination. So it's something like this, guys. So whenever I'm doing FAR, the visual that I want you to have is this. See, we are starting with the financial statement. So we need to know what is the financial statement. Okay. Now, see, gap is like law. It's if you're following financial accounting, if you're doing financial accounting, and let's say if I want to know how Alphabet has performed in the year, what I would do, I would actually look at their statements and interpret, right? A lot of people like Warren Buffett, his company Berkshire Hathaway has made a fortune by just investing in the right companies at the right time. And how has Warren Buffett taken that decision? By interpreting the financial statements. So what are these financial statements? When we start, we are going to just touch upon these concepts. What comprises the financial statements? So this is what comprises financial statements. According to what? According to US generally accepted accounting principles. So this is the P. This is what you have to know. But in order to know this, there are a lot of concepts. So what we'll try to do is, we'll try to first start with this topic to help you understand the call of every statement. And then after we have done everything, we will have one more session in the last, one or two more sessions in the fashion, where we can bring this together and then we can give you, okay, now this is a scenario. Tell me, how are you going to interpret the balance sheet? How are you going to interpret the income statement? What are the key things that you have to be aware of? So it's like saying this is your vector. You have to follow this. And at the same time, from the 30,000 feet, you go down, 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 understand all the concepts. Because that is what, in real life, you build these bottom up, right? You start with JEs. So you have some base concepts, right? So you have a lot of, so these financial statements can be balance sheet, P&L. So this is a balance sheet. This is a P&L. This is our comprehensive income. So we need to know what is comprehensive income, statement of changes in equity. So once you understand everything, okay, so we are first just going to touch on what is financial statement. Then we are going to understand and talk about every element of the financial statement in as much depth as is possible. So we are going to build the balance sheet. We are going to go into the P&L one item at a time. But ultimately, after doing everything, we will go back and say, okay, if any of these items are given to me, if leases is tested, if debtors are tested, revenue recognition is tested, I know how it will impact my P&L, my balance sheet, my statement of changes in equity, my cash flows, my concept P&L, and my concept financial statements and my notes. So every item that we will do, we will have to trace it up with the financial statements. So this is like a report card. Company, when I look at the report card, I should be able to understand how's the management, how is the financials doing, how is the business doing, should I invest in that company or I shouldn't invest in that company. So first is for profit entities. This is what we're going to do typically. For financial reporting, they've also mentioned about not for profits, and then there's government accounting. So three major things. If you look at the financials of not-for-profits, for-profit entities, and government accounting government statements, what are you going to see there? And how are you going to interpret it? Below that, this is, typically if I want to see what is Alphabet's performance, what would I do? I will type, give me the annual return of Alphabet. So what is this annual return? What do I get in that annual documents? Where do I get these, all of these financial statements? For that, we need to know what is the SEC requirements. What is your annual data that you have to fill up? What is the quarterly data that you have to fill up? And also, there's something called earnings per share, which we are not going to do at the same. So I'm not going to follow the hierarchy of what the ICPA says. I'm going to follow concepts and we're going to link concepts. But ultimately, when you look at the SEC, who's SEC? SEC is Securities and Exchange Commission, which is akin to SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India. So typically, if you are an issuer, that means if you're a public limited company, and I've given you the opportunity to go and approach the world at large to take money from, I have put certain restrictions on you. have told you that I need an annual return to be filed by you. The annual returns should have all of these audited financial statements with the auditor's report. So actually what we're doing is for an audit, we are going to dissect each of these. We are going to dissect the financial statements, and we're going to dissect the auditor's report and all the other data that flows in the annual filing by the issuers. This is what if you're not following GAAP, what if you're following cash, what if you're following any other methods of accounting, and then it's a ratio analysis. Okay. So these are as far as the financial reporting topics are concerned. Now, what I want you to do is understand this very well. So when AICP has given you the syllabus, what is that topic that can be tested in the SIMS level at the highest level? So if you look at it, apart from statement of comprehensive income, all the other topics can be tested at the highest level, which is the analysis level. They've also told you what kind of SIMS can come from here. For instance, I'm not going to give you details of all of them now. I'm just going to highlight certain kind of SIMs that may come. Okay. They're not going to give you like, the trial balance, and then they will ask you, okay, now fill up the P&L, now make the balance sheet. They will not give that to you. But what they will give you is, see what they've said. Detect, investigate, and correct discrepancies identified while agreeing the balance sheet to supporting docs and source data. That means, for example, they'll give you a balance sheet, and that is a wrong balance sheet. Then they'll give you the trial balance, and then they'll give you the source. So if I'm extending the lease example, they will give you the leasing contract. They'll give you the emails. They'll give you the, let's say, board of directors resolution. Now they will tell you the company has actually treated a lease as a long-term lease, but actually it should have been a short-term lease. So there are errors. You have to first figure out where are those errors. Then you will have to correct those errors. So understand that for knowing balance sheet, it's not enough that I start with balance sheet and I teach you balance sheet. You have to know all the elements. Ultimately, how it will flow through in the balance sheet. And always remember that now they're not, so earlier, before 2024, they would say, okay, I will give you the data and now you're going to interpret. So they will tell you, okay, this is the leasing concept. This was the lease. They will give you everything. Now they're not giving you, they're giving you the source document. You have to take the data from the source and then you have to figure out what errors we have made. Okay. Same with the income statement. Same with the statement of changes in equity. Same with the statement of cash flows. Also, they're trying to figure out, derive the impact of transactions on the cash flow statement. So they have told you what are the topics that we are going to test you at the analytical level. What kind of questions can be thrown at you at the analytical level? So our job is that when we go to these topics, we have to be aware that these are the kind of questions that can come up. So in very simple language, I would call it discrepancy analysis. I would call it roll forward question. I would call it reconciliation question. So you need to understand, okay, the moment you look at a question, you should be able to understand, okay, this is from this topic and this is a discrepancy question. This is from this topic, this is a roll forward question. This is from this topic, this is an analytical question or whatever. So we are going to give some terms where you can immediately understand, okay, this is discrepancy analysis, this is reconciliation, this is roll forward. The moment you can do that, then so much easier for you to start applying those concepts and working out the sets. So be aware of what are the topics that can be tested at the analytical level. The moment you go down, can you see none of these topics can be tested at the sim level. So you can have ratios and you will give some small questions. So not sims, but not very difficult sims. Of course, there can be application sims. But when you get a question from ratios or government accounting, see, government accounting, they're going to give you only MCQs because they're going to test you at the lowest level of skill. For all the others in this area, they are going to give you the application-based question. So typically, we cannot deal with these areas separately. We will go to each underlying topic, prepare it so well that when I bring it back to this, you should be in a position to make the most. Okay, so I'll start with the beginning, then I'll go deep down, and then again, we are going to ensure that whatever we have learned from the base, is it all culminating and coming to the top. Okay, so this is as far as financial reporting is concerned. Then they're going to talk about the balance sheet accounts. So they're going to start with the assets and they're going to end with equity. See, many people tell you to start with balance sheet and think about it horizontally, the way you see it in most of the annual returns. My suggestion is when I started learning accounts, I started learning it through the T's. Everything in my mind was a T. It was not a horizontal format. And I suppose most of you also have a similar case. Yes, no, guys, everybody? Most of you are falling in the same level, isn't it? So what my job is going to be to link the present understanding of FAR with the requirements of US GAAP. So I am going to have a T concept. I'm not going to deal with the horizontal. I'm going to follow majorly the T's, both in P&L and the balance sheet. So if you look at the balance sheet and if you look at the asset side here, I'm going to still follow the format that we have grown up with. We're going to start with the most liquid assets. And this is where the US GAAP differs from India's. In the US GAAP, they start with the most liquid assets and then go to the most illiquid assets. In India, we do the opposite. We start with the most illiquid assets first, saying that it is first land and then machinery, and in the end, we will have cash, but it's the reverse in the US. So, starting from the first one, and this is where it's very, very important, guys. Do you see? Most of the topics from this area can be tested at the analytical level. So you start with cash, analytical level. So if you look at most content providers, you'll see, cash is so easy. When you get a question for cash, you'll get completely zapped. Why? Because they can test you at the analytical level. One, of course, is the BRS. But then another thing is, see, look at the kind of questions they've told you. Investigation of unreconciled balances to determine whether adjustment entries are required. In other words, very simply put, we will have bank account as per your books, bank balance that the bank will communicate to you via the bank statement. And they can give you two kind of questions. They can ask you to construct the BRS, which is a bank reconciliation statement, or they can give you a wrong BRS with the extract of the P&L and extract of the journal entries. And now they will ask you to figure out where they have made a mistake. And now understand that these mistakes you cannot go and rub because the entries have already been passed in the system. They will ask you to pass the adjustment entries to correct those mistakes. Are you understanding what I'm saying? That means the system has already passed wrong entries. You have now to understand what those wrong entries were and then pass the adjustment entries to rectify those mistakes, knowing fully well that you cannot go and rub these entries and put the right entries. This is actually the easiest topic is actually the most complicated. I'll give you a question on cash, a sim, and you'll be flabbergasted because you would have never heard or never seen a question like that. And that is the biggest risk of FAR now. The easiest topic can be questioned in the most complicated manner. As a student, I would have preferred a complicated topic to be questioned in the easiest manner. But now the challenge with FAR is the easiest topic can be tested in the most complicated manner. Can you see this? This is trade receivables. So far we have heard about discrepancy analysis as a kind of SIM. Now, these are not technical terms used by the AI CPA. These are the terms that I use to simplify the kind of questions that we're discussing. We have spoken about reconciliation. So I give you this data, that data you're going to reconcile. We have spoken now. See, this is what? This is a roll forward. What is a roll forward? Very simply, I had first year debtors account. I need to close that and see how it is going to flow into second year. Okay, so all of those entries, we have to construct these in the year one, in the year two, and then figure out the closing balance of debtors in year two. That is actually a roll forward. So do you see what is roll forward? It's just the T's account for the 2 years and how you're going to determine the closing balance in year. Okay. So typically when you see a trade receivable, we start with debtors, we start with provision for doubtful debts, and we have the bad debts in the P&L. So I reconcile all the three, and from last year, I bring it forward to this year. This is roll forward. Again, I can give you a debtors ledger, and then I'll tell you that this subledger, so let's say a debtors ledger is not closed properly to the general ledger. Figure out where is the mistake and then to bridge that mistake. That's reconciliation. Similarly, inventory, PPE, investment. So see, the moment the topic becomes difficult, the level of testing becomes easy. Okay, but if the topic is very easy, the level of question is really hard. Okay, so focus on those stuff. This is like a very dangerous topic, guys. Okay, when you look at the content providers, you will see, oh, payable, accrued liabilities looks very simple. But when they start giving you questions which are very detailed on notes payable and how are you going to convert that notes payable, and then we have factoring involved, this can go really complicated. Coupons. How are you going to encash the coupons? How are you going to account for these loyalty points? All of those become very important. Warranties, contingencies, this becomes very important. So please understand. So this reconciliation is from the sub ledger to general ledger. Okay. The beauty of this is very, very nicely. The best part is when you do FAR and then when you go to audit, it's like saying I first I'm first in the shoes of the accountant making the entries. And then I switch on to the shoes as an outsider who's verifying those entries to figure out where I made a mistake. So when you do FAR and then you follow it up with audit, you are so clear in your mind about what are the areas that you have to emphasize on. Okay, so understand that these topics are very easy, but they're very critical because the kind of questions they can throw at you can be varied. The last topic is select transactions, where they've told you that these are the areas where I will test you the transaction. So how are you going to account for? So ideally, these are asset balances, right? These are asset, liabilities, equity. These would be P&L items. What are the P&L items? If there are changes in accounting principle, how am I going to apply those changes? If I have made an error correction, how am I going to correct that error correction? Contingencies, the notes, right? Revenue recognition, again, P&L. Accounting for income. Can you see again, the moment the topic becomes difficult, the question becomes easy. The moment leases, can you see? The moment the topic becomes lease at FAR level. Okay, now two things I want to tell you. One is that revenue recognition and leases. Both of these topics then these are the only two topics that are going to overlap in FAR and BAR. So if you're doing it in FAR, you will have it in entirety. When you do it in BAR, again, you will have the same question, the full set in BAR also in its entirety. The only delta is in FAR, they've restricted that these questions would be tested at the maximum level, which is application. It is not going to go beyond application. But in BAR, these two topics are going to be tested. So in FAR, it's going to maximum would be at the application level. But in BAR, these topics would be tested at the analytical level. Okay, the content that we're going to talk about is going to be the same. But when you look at FAR, do you see most of the bigger topics that could have been easily done once I know the topic? That is now reduced. So you will have leases and revenue recognition, income taxes, all of this maximum application level. And those topics, subsequent event is one of the areas which is being tested heavily. They're going to club subsequent events, contingencies together, and then they're giving you questions in SIM. And most importantly, they are giving you questions which is mixing up concepts, inventory, maybe with creditors, and then provisioning. So you're going to mix concepts and know it. So the simplest topics can be tested in the most complicated level. And that is what makes FAR more challenging post 2024. Okay. So this is how we are going to prepare our studies. We are going to cover everything, but we are going to be mindful about the areas and the kind of questions that can be tested at the analytical level. And those areas we're trying to take best questions and then you're going to do it. The way we have structured our classes, probably I'm not going to touch as much on the MCQs in the live class. I'll give you MCQ tests which would cover all the important questions from that area. But we are going to do a lot of SIMs in the live classes. Nearly every topic that we're going to crack, we're going to follow it up with the SIM. So we are going to teach you through the SIMs only.